Commissioner Herzler,
Here.
Commissioner Eichelberger,
Present.
Controller McComb.
Thanks, Teresa. Is there any public comment? Hearing none. We have a motion for approval, salary board action, excuse me.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval of minutes of the September 25th meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval of HR dean hearing policy. Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Is there any other business to be brought in front of the salary board? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned. Okay, could you please rise for the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the Board of Commissioners meeting to order. Roll call, Teresa.
Commissioner DeFilippo,
Present.
Commissioner Herzler,
Here.
and Commissioner Eichelberger, sorry.
Thank you, Teresa. Is there any public comment? Hearing none, next we have employee recognition. Debbie Anderson for 35 years of service.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Good, welcome. Yes, Debbie Anderson, folks, celebrates 35 years of service. She was hired back in 1982 as a department clerk 2 in the probation area. 1986 was promoted to department clerk 3. 1996 transferred to the DA's office as an executive secretary 2. And January 2003 was promoted to ARD coordinator. Debbie, thank you very much for your years of service.
Thank you.
Dave, anything you'd like to say?
Sure, thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to say a few words about Debbie. There's numerous members of the DA's office here to help us recognize her accomplishments. It really is, and I don't want to offend anybody that's sitting here, but Debbie is truly one of the most important and valuable people that we have in the office. We've got her some help now, but she virtually single-handedly runs our diversion program, and the diversion program, while it's something that we believe strongly in the county because it gives people a second chance, and most people get in trouble with the law. It happens one time, and then they don't come back. And we give them that second chance, but it's not an easy thing. And a number of years ago, we made an adjustment in the program, and we sort of moved some things around to do a fast track program. And Debbie does things so well and gets people through that program so well. One of the hardest adjustments was we had to say, you're too helpful to these people. You know, sometimes they have to have some responsibility because, so the number of people that have succeeded, not just been through the program, but have succeeded in the program simply because of Debbie's hard work, it's you can't count that number. It's incredible. So while diversion is a great thing, it's good for people, we also could not run our office without diverting cases the way we do. So attorneys have caseloads and clerical staff has caseloads. Debbie has an entire division of the office that she has run for years single-handedly and now with some help. So Debbie, we've all grown up together and you do a wonderful job for us. We've seen you and Andy, who's your daughter, and now she's moving on to college and working life. And it's hard to believe it's been this long, I think, for all of us. You obviously started, part-time while you were in elementary school. But just on behalf of the office and your colleagues here in the county, I want to thank you because we couldn't do it without you. None of us would be as successful as we are without you. So thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
about her speech.
All right, next we have approval of the meeting minutes of September 21 and September 25th. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of September 21st and September 25th.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval, personnel transactions. Is there a motion?
I move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, item 7, is approval of contracts and grants. Is there a motion for approval?
I'll make the motion to approve the contracts and grants, items 7-1A through C and 7-2A through H.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval of Cumberland County Tax Claim Bureau depository sale consent. Is there a motion?
For approval of the depository statements.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval of the Senior Community Service Employment Program. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next, we have approval of Claremont Nursing and Rehabilitation Center policy signature updates. Keith, can we approve all of these at once?
Yes, yes, you can.
That include statement of equal employment opportunity policy, admission statement policy for Claremont, and notice of non-discrimination. Is there a motion?
I move for approval of the policies as stated.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Oh, I missed one.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Item number 10 is approval of vehicle transfer from the Conservation District to the Planning Department. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any questions or comments?
Stoner's probably watching on there.
Sorry, I missed
Just
one.
wondering what's going on.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Now then, I'm back on track. Item 12, approval of capital project request for IMTO, which is a computer fall life cycle project. Total project cost $78,000. Is there a motion?
I move for approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval of reappointment of Carol Madden to the Cumberland Perry County Drug and Alcohol Commission for a 3-year term effective November 1 this year and expiring October 31st, 2020. Is there a motion?
Make the motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is approval of the appointment of Linda Morris to the South Central Workforce Development Board for a 4-year term effective October 9 this year and expiring June 31st, 2021. Is there a motion?
I move for approval of the appointment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next is the approval of general disbursements, transfer authorizations, items 15A through G. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Any questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I'd like to report we had executive sessions on October 5th, 2:30 p.m., personnel issues. Also report acceptance of monthly reports from the clerk of the court, recorder of deeds, register of wills, veterans affairs, and change of assessments for the month of September. Next, we have a comparison report regarding collections, historical and current. Mr. Clapsaddle.
Do I have 5-10 minutes? Okay.
Much as usual.
I'll run through. I believe you all have copy of the report. I have one spare. I don't. You have that?
I don't know.
Did we get,
It should be at the end of your packet.
It looks like this.
I added into the,
I'm going to run through this as efficiently as I can. I think there's a lot of good information in here
Okay.
and to maybe aid decision-making going forward. I always like to start with an overview on page 1. This is the amount the county has to, the Court of Common Pleas of Cumberland County has to collect. 57 million in total at the end of 16. By the way, I'm going to talk about 2017 results on the last page. I don't have as quite the number of data points for that as what I do for the rest of the year, but I think the trend is all relevant because it seems to be playing itself out, even in 17 to a large degree. So again, the receivable, important to understand, increased 6 million or about 12% between 15 and 16. You know, it's kind of running away from us. Most of the balance owed is restitution, which grew 15% in the year from 15 to the end of 16, 15% increase. So, by the way, you may ask a question later on. All cost fees and fines reflected on page 1, the growth of 25 million to 27, includes state receivable amounts to municipalities. That's not just county share. Second page, titled Annual Court Assessments, 12-Year Trend. County share, this is, as the title shows, county share only. I extended this a bit further to cover all the data points that we have in our database. It goes back to 2004, so it's a 12-year display. The black line is a trend line to show the steep increase in criminal amounts to criminal cases due to the county over the decade. You can see the blue line is the actual line that'll vary a little bit year to year, but reflects nonetheless a very steep increase. From 2004 to 2016, it roughly doubled the amount owed annually, assessments owed to Cumberland County over a 12-year period. So it's a growing challenge for the county keeping up with those costs. The following page reflects first-year assessments only versus first-year collections only on those same assessments. I talked about this in the past. The first year are where the vast majority of costs, I'll say, can be collected and are, to one degree or another, of success. The graph illustrates the prime contributor. This graph illustrates, by the way, the pink line increased assessments in year 1, 35% over a decade. I lopped off a couple of years to the left, show a decade. The black line reflects collections on those first year assessments and reflects a 0% increase over a decade. So in other words, we're flat. Said another way, we're achieving declining effectiveness at collecting in year 1. From a high of 44% at the beginning part of the decade to 29% in 2016. And the data shows that is very, very difficult and more costly to try to make up years down the road when people are off supervision. People haven't experienced an assertive ask through various collection practices over the years. So to a large extent, amounts not collected in the first year or two are not recoverable. They are to some extent, but again, it costs the county money. And this graph reflects the reason that the receivable is growing so significantly. Again, we showed a $6 million increase in total assessments on page 1. And it's largely due to the growing ineffectiveness of collections in the first 2 years. Not to say that there hasn't been some change, some increase in effectiveness since the low of 2013 and 2014, but it's been actually a very small increase, so I'll talk about that later. Also important to point out is the environment that the county Court of Common Pleas is collecting. The collections in the last handful of years of the past 10 have been similar economic conditions as existed approximately 10 years prior. The recession didn't hit until the beginning of 2009, the very end of 2008. Back in those similar conditions, we're collecting approximately half, were twice as effectively as what the court is in the last few years. The following page, the blue graph, is similar to the graph we just looked at, except it encompasses cases in the first 24 months of their existence since sentencing. And again, you'll see an even steeper increase because now added on to the growing background line, I'll say, in assessments are the unsuccessful balances carried over into the following year to collect. And you can see the black line reflecting collections remains relatively flat during the first 2 years. The following table reflects offenders' propensity to pay based solely on Cumberland County Court of Common Pleas experience over the past decade. And you can see in year one, average collection rate is 34% with a range of 26 to 45, or an approximate doubling. In the first year cases in 2016, Court of Common Pleas achieved an effectiveness of collections of 29%. So they're a bit off the bottom from 26%, but still a long way to go to achieve its past success. After year three, you're down, historically, the county is down into the low single digits of collection effectiveness. These are years post year three cases that offenders are off. Active supervision is more costly, more time consuming, more resource intensive than to try to collect those overbalances. And I'd like to point out that the 45% again was achieved in a period of similar economic conditions to those we enjoy today. It's hard to imagine a better economic time in Cumberland County than is occurring. And almost anywhere you go, folks are looking for people to work. So that I tend to look at the 40 to 45% effectiveness as indicative of offenders' both willingness and ability to pay back then. Kind of regardless of how effective we are, how served we are in the past. So if they were in similar economic conditions, able and willing to pay, the decade prior, one would expect in mirroring conditions to that exist today, should they be asked assertively. Collections, the following page, collections on cases 3 years and older, county share. This page is a complement to the total collections from the collections on the blue graph. So the blue graph line, the black line on the blue graph reflects rather flat collections. What I did to achieve the figures on collections on cases 3 years and older, I subtracted the collections in the first 2 years from total collections in the Court of Common Clerk of Court's office to get these. And you can see that collections have approximately doubled over the past decade on collections 3 years and older. That looks good, but it's important to understand because of the lack of effectiveness as compared to where the Court of Common Pleas was about a decade ago. We're still losing, the Court of Common Pleas is still losing significant ground because of this doubling. We have enormous sums we're wanting to add to the receivable year in, year out. The following page, Court of Common Pleas, collections trends. This reflects the receivable in each year, as of, for each year illustrated, and collections on that receivable, for the first 5 years of cases, the most recent 5 years of cases. And again, I share back the propensity to pay. Most all collections occur within the first 5 years, and you're in the low single digits beyond cases over 5 years. So this is a good indicator of collection success overall, except for those trailing years. In 2008, the court collected about 27% on the county share. By 2016, it was collecting 18.52%, a decrease of 9%. If the court in 16, and this is the far right column I have, what if the court repeated in 2016 its 2008 effectiveness? And the county share, the county would have realized $3.3 million against $2.3 million that it actually did in that year. And victims would have achieved in excess of $1 million more than what it did, with the same logic. What are some of the reasons I'll offer, suggest for this? Underutilization of efficient existing collection practices involving outside resources favorable, such as DL suspensions. That's simply file sharing with PennDOT. PennDOT kind of takes the ball. We can send letters out preceding that if we wish to see if somebody wants to opt out by getting current. But that's underutilized. That's been kind of done on a test basis, but not large scale. York County reported just a number of months ago, the Collection Advisory Board, that that's their single most successful collection practice. They collected about $600,000 a year just using that practice. Our MDJs uniformly use that with great success, collecting about approximately 95% or so of their case
This
balances.
is license suspension.
License suspensions. Yeah. And then the commissioners contract with 2 collection agencies that, well-researched, very competent, can handle large volumes, run nightly searches for people. On that point, we spoke with York. I spoke with York County. York said, I asked what balance they have with their collection agencies, and they said about $20 million. Last I've heard from the Court of Common Pleas, we have about 300,000 of our 57, or more by this point, 57 balance, so about 300,000. So it's about 10% the balance that York has. And again, that's an outside resource. It's simply a matter of file sharing. And then those cases are worked while we're focusing on the ones, I suggest they should be the earlier ones, earlier in life. And we can probably get, one imagines, substantial return by allowing, modeling after some of the counties such as York, who utilize outside resources in higher volume and more effectively than the Cumberland County. Finally, the last page. This is the only page with 2017 data. In order to gauge how we're doing through August, I ran numbers. We ran numbers, our office, through August, going back about 11 years. And we're doing better in county share. We have realizing $200,000 more in 17 through August than what we did in the prior year. We've had 3 other years over the past approximately decade where we've also gone up about 11%. That's a good thing, but in total, that's on track, using simple math, projected out to achieve an increase of about $300,000. $300,000, I suggest is still a great distance from where we should be. Easier gains can be achieved and are reflected here. This is certainly 2017 isn't on track to be a significant turnaround. Restitution is a good story. It's up significantly, 26%, although there were 2 other years in the past decade where it went up similar percentages, 28 and 29%. Restitution itself is subject to a lot of variability, so you can't see wide swings. It'll be interesting to see if that trend continues. We hope so. That's all that I have. Happy to. entertain.
Like the 2017 number on the next page is, that is or is not 12 months?
On the very last page, that's 8 months. So we're 2/3 of the year.
Sorry. Okay, so those numbers.
All these numbers are just through August of the year.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
It's a little confusing.
Got it. You said York County has 20 million in its collection agency. We have 300,000.
We had last, it may have been up a bit. Yeah.
Do you know what their total court receivable is? York
I
County? Okay.
don't, that's not published. I don't have, I don't think, legitimate access to that.
Still, it sounds like we may not be using agencies.
Well, what interestingly, what York does is they use the less costly practices first. So they will send, coming out of probation, they will send cases first to collection agencies for a period of time. And then they'll start the more resource, time-intensive collection practices, such as collection courts, such as administrative hearings, that sort of thing. Whereas we do it at the very end, that would be a last resort activity, and only for those cases where we exhaustively, internally, cannot find these various location traces. So it's somewhat backwards if the intent is to use the least costly practice first, and then only have those as a last resort that need the more intensive work go to collection court, et cetera.
Can I, I mean, it looks to me as though with the efforts that we put forth, we're just scratching the surface if we're making any progress at all. Let me ask you this. If I'm looking at this data, what we see is, year over year, an increase in the assessment that's being, or the fines and costs and restitutions being ordered by the court, okay? Are we even keeping pace with?
We're falling behind, and we're falling behind because our effectiveness in year 1 and 2 are so far off the mark. That, if we were maintaining effectiveness, those collections in years 1 and 2 would be increasing at the 35 and 45% rate. Instead, year 1 is increasing at 0% rate. The combination year 1 and 2 is increasing at less than 1% a year. As contrasted with, so that's really what needs to change for the county to as I get a handle and start to at least approximately maintain effectiveness.
I mean, if I'm looking at these numbers, I see it looks as though like there's been a slight uptick in collections. But, you would expect that, we should at least be keeping pace with the assessments that are being levied, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because they're going up significantly.
If we're maintaining effectiveness, and it all comes to putting the proper processes and procedures in place to be able to do that. And we're not getting people while they're on active supervision. We're not enlisting the probation officers as effectively as what we could be, is what the court could be.
So we've had the warrant collection unit in place now since, was it 2014?
It was the last quarter of 2014. So the first full year reflecting that is 2015.
Mike, I don't want to put words in your mouth, are you suggesting that we are not jumping after the younger delinquencies, younger meaning more recent as we should be?
That's what the data shows. The data shows that's where we're losing the most ground.
Because I know.
And that's an area that you can't make up.
Many years ago, I worked for a credit card company or collection agency. And boy, was that fun. But once we hit that 120-day mark, it just.
Yeah, right. That's where you're right.
I think that's where we're
Yeah.
getting, maybe that's an area we need to change, or I don't know.
Kind of chasing our tails, just focusing on the real world cases.
The bottom line is, since we first discussed this back in 2013, we talked amount of money that's owed to the county has actually gone up.
Very much.
Yeah.
I think York has 3 collection folks to complement the probation officers.
Do any comparative numbers that show how much, what the success rate is for probation versus the collections units on your or?
I don't, the data is not in the system in that manner. Yeah.
Is that data
So I
you can get,
can't
or is
split
it-
out. I will say, I think it's a fair assessment that in the first 2 years, to the extent probation has the majority of cases, and,
Yeah.
that would seem to be reflective of their effort.
Well, if all things working, that should be the case.
Right, in accordance with the allocation of roles over the life of a case, the one collection unit generally gets it after about 3 years on average. So they have less responsibility for the first 2 years. Probation has the majority, even the initial ability to pay assessments, I think were fairly recently transferred almost completely to the probation office. So that front end is probation.
Right, without putting you on the spot, you don't need to answer this unless you want to, but are you saying that our courts are not utilizing the tools that are available to them, as effectively as they should be to seek essentially payment of these, both fines and costs and restitution?
I'll answer that in relation to the other practices, more efficient practices I see in other counties. For example, York, and Cumberland at any one point in time may be doing better or less than York. It's hard to compare because York hasn't experienced, a big trough in recent years, so it's really difficult to compare results. But certainly York leverages outside resources such as PennDOT for their license suspensions. Once the file is shared with PennDOT, it's largely hands-on. So it's a matter of file sharing in that case. Very efficient for Cumberland County as far as use of resources, cost effectiveness. And the same with.
And we're not doing that?
It's on a tentative trial basis for our Court of Common Pleas cases. Despite, I'll say, despite it being used uniformly by all MDJ houses with great success.
Okay. And then relative to the use of the collection agencies that we authorized, why do we only have some of the debt that's turned over?
Yeah, it's been advocated that millions of dollars, take $10 million, the cases that you're not going to get into are the older, say beyond 4 years. And about half the 57 million at the end of 16 was beyond 3 years old. So take a big chunk of that 26, 27 million and send that to a debt collection agency. That's been advocated.
Why haven't we done that?
There's a perception, the response back was that, we don't want to send it to a debt collection agency until we've worked it in-house exhaustively and are confident that kind of no more money can be gotten out of the case. But that isn't the purpose of having a debt collection agency. You should use your most cost-efficient practices first, so then what you're spending time on actually can be argued to deserve the time.
Well, it's quite clear that, essentially some of these older cases, we're never going to get to. So, with the rate, the pace we're on, I don't know why we shouldn't be, referring more of these cases to collection agency. But I personally think that everybody that's involved in this in the county, hello, everybody involved in this in the county needs to get, we need to review on this whole thing and find out why we're not making more progress. And I'm not interested in spending any more dollars on any more personnel, I'll just say that right now. You know, we created a unit that hopefully get us above the curve, and we're still below the curve as far as I'm concerned. So I think we need to have a conversation with our court personnel and everybody who's involved in this to see why we're falling behind instead of, you know, moving forward in the right direction. Because I'll tell you what, I mean, the taxpayers, I mean, I don't know that they understand that essentially the county is owed, you know, $27.3 million. People who owe debts to the county, that's not counting restitution. Restitution is even more than that, $29 million as at the end of last year. That's, I mean, those victims of crime are entitled to that restitution. Mike, I appreciate you taking a close look at this. I really do. I think it raises some red flags for me and hopefully for the board here.
But we don't necessarily have this right now, but I'm sure it would not be difficult to put together. But we need to have a true accounting of what the cost is of doing it in-house. And because I think from what I've heard from some of the comments said in earlier sessions from others, is that, if I'm interpreting it correctly, that collections is going to take a percentage off the top and we're going to lose money, and that we'd be better off using people that we already have in-house. Now that so-called logic misses the point of what the cost is in maintaining those folks in-house who are presumably doing this work. So I think if we're going to do any true comparison of what the costs are, we need to be effectively measuring what the costs are of internally driven collections. So I don't know if anybody's calculated that in a useful, meaningful manner, but I think we have some more comparative work to do. This is a very important step. Thank you for this.
I think that would make sense, look at it in conjunction with the tax.
Michael, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any other business to discuss? Motion for adjournment, so moved.